In the upcoming lesson, we are going to be connecting to the Star Wars API, so showing you how you can make a connection and then also interact with the results. There's a number of different options that are going to be within the drop-down, so you can either get the results of the films, people, or planets. So this will give you an overall idea of the number of the items that are contained within the films, or you can get the various planets that were mentioned within the Star Wars API. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Editor on the left-hand side, this is Visual Studio Code. I've got a basic HTML page that's linked to a JavaScript file, and then currently right now the JavaScript file is blank, and that's what we're going to be covering in this lesson. On the right-hand side, I've got the web browser opened to the HTML page, so that's using Live Server from Visual Studio Code, also the DevTools console opened at the bottom. So let's go ahead and we're going to select the button as well as the output class element. So this will allow us to interact with the elements using JavaScript code. And we're simply going to do a query selector selection, selecting the element with the button tag. So it's going to return back the first element that's going to be matching within the selection. And also query selector selecting the output area so that we can output and display some information back to the user when they make the connection. So let's go ahead and we're going to add an event listener to the button. The event that we're going to be adding is going to be a click event, and the click event is going to fire off an anonymous function. So we'll do that simply within the click there. So whenever the button gets clicked, what we want to do is we want to make a connection. So we're going to be connecting to a URL. So the URL that we're connecting to is going to be this one here. So it's going to be available at swappy.dev/API. So this is a Star Wars API, and it gives you a really nice popular API that you can play with and interact with to get more familiar with making connections to the API. And the function that we're going to be using in order to make the connection is going to be fetch. So when the button gets clicked, we're going to invoke the fetch function. It's going to be fetching to a URL and then returning back the promises. So once it gets a response back, the response is going to be coming back as JSON. So we're able to set it as JSON data, and that's coming back. And then once we have the response back, it's going to come in as a data object. And then that data object, right now what we're going to do is we're going to simply output it into the console. So using the console log, let's output data into the console. So when the button gets clicked, it connects to the URL and then returns back all of this data back down to the bottom. So let's also create a little bit more of an interactive API. So we're going to create some page elements on the page, and then those will filter down into the various films, people, species, starships, and planets. So it's going to return back quite a bit more robust information. We're going to be adding it into the output and also updating what we're going to be selecting for the button. So once the button gets clicked, let's create a select. So it's going to be under the option film. And then we also want to provide an option for selecting the people. And there's our drop down, so we can select the various values and then make the connection. So right now it's still connecting to the basic API. Let's add in the other options. In addition to this, we can run through and get returned back the films, people, planets, species, starships, and vehicles, and then make that a little bit more interactive, where we can select all of the option items. So right now we'll just select a few. Select from the select, and we'll just call this actually select value, and using the document query selector, let's go in and we're going to select the value for the select element. And right now what we'll do is we'll just console log the value out. So taking that select object and returning back the current selection value. So let's see what we get. So that's how we're getting those values of planets and people. So let's add to the API selection. So it's going to be added to the URL. And just do a / there. And then here we can do the select value. So now it's going to be returning back the next category that was selected, and it's going to return that back into the API. So we've got 6 items there. And once we've got the values within the results, then we can list those values out. So now let's update what we're outputting into the output area. And we'll call a function my output. It's going to take a value in, which will be the returned value of from within the data that's being returned back. We want to loop through the result, and we're also going to be passing in the selected value. So it's going to be a second value. So it's going to have, and we'll just name it the same. We'll have a data and a value. And then here we can construct the output that we have, as well as getting the results value. So let's get the array of results, and that's going to be contained within data results. So we're returning back a total, and this is going to be the array of results. So we can loop through for each one of those, selecting out the element, and total does need to be an array, and we'll select out the element. And then we can output the results there using the title and the additional information. So selecting the output and update the inner HTML. I'm using the backticks and selecting out search for, and then the $sign in the curly brackets. That will indicate the value that was being searched for. And as we produce each one of those, a separate div onto the page, and whatever we've got within the element. So what this is going to do when the button gets clicked and output, and then we're also going to take the button disabled and set that to true, so it can't be clicked more than once. And within the output, the inner HTML, just type in searching so that the user does have some feedback about what is currently happening. So we do the connect, it does searching, disables the button, and right now it's not outputting all of the values as we're not outputting into the console. So let's do that. We'll still output the values into the console. And we want to be adding to the inner HTML. So try that one more time. So now searching, and then it returns back the title results. Within the results, we've got the title there and the first item of the array. And then there's also some additional APIs that you can go down. So right now it's just giving you the films, and we need to re-enable. Let's select the button and enable disabled to false. And try this one more time where we're searching for the people. And right now it's coming back as undefined. So the reason that is that this is the people is searching for a name instead of a title. So we're going to have to make some updates to that, where here we're selecting out the title, but this actually should be a name. So let's make a selection of that where we're going to have an array of values. We want to select the name, and let's check out what the planets has. So that one is going to be under name, and then the planets themselves are going to have the results, and that's also going to be under name. So we can check to see and can apply a condition. So let's do a ternary operator and search for the item name, and checking out if the value is equal to, and if the value is equal to films, and this should be searching for the string of films. So if it returns back films, it's going to use title, and if it returns back people or planets, it's going to use the name. So this allows us to output all of these values directly on the page.